I think all of us would agree, whether you believe in God or not, all of us would agree that if there is a God, we would love for our God to be like the God we just sang about. That's the kind of God all of us would sign up for, isn't it? Because that would be extraordinary if we followed a God who is actually like that. And I know many of us believe that's true. Some of you are trying to figure out whether that's true, and some of you are trying to reconcile the image or experience you have had that's made you think of God one way versus what we just sang about, which is a very different type of God. And that's part of the issue, isn't it? All of us want to believe that kind of God exists, and then all of us have experiences in life, don't we, that cause us into question and wonder. It's like, well, if God's like that, then why? Why did this happen in my life? Or why do bad things happen in general? Or why are all the things happening in Ukraine? Why would God allow? Why would God allow? Why would God allow? We have all of these questions, sometimes on a global scale, a lot of times on a very, very personal scale. And one of the things that is frustrating to me, and maybe you can relate to this, one of the things that's frustrating to me is in many churches and around many Christians, you may have had this experience. It just feels like sometimes it's not okay to ask the questions that all of us have. It's just not okay. It doesn't feel like a safe place. It feels like I'm not supposed to ask that, and if I ask that, they're going to think differently of me because I asked that. Or some of you have had this experience. You just had questions about the Bible, different things that are said, and different documents in Scripture, and you're like, well, here I kind of believe that, and I like that, but what about this over here? And you got these questions, and again, it just doesn't feel like you can always ask those questions. And if you do ask them, maybe you've had this experience like me. If you do ask them at times, the answer you get back from other Christians is, well, you just need to have more faith. You just need to believe. And whenever I was told that, I thought, that's just the terrible answer. Like, if I'm just supposed to close my eyes and check my intelligence or my intellectual rigor or intellectual honesty at the door, and I'm just supposed to take a leap of faith and believe. Well, I don't know if that's the kind of God or if that's the kind of faith that's really worth following. You would think that if God's real and if God is who we just sang about, if God is who he claimed to be, that would be a God you could ask questions of, and that would be a God where there would be answers. I don't know that I want to follow a God who says, I'm giving you no evidence and I'm giving you no answers. You just got to believe. Close your eyes, take a leap and believe. The good news is, if you've ever felt that frustration, that was not how Jesus approached people with questions. Jesus was never offended, he was never put off, and he never cast aside anybody who had a question for him. Jesus actually was the exact opposite. When you read the eyewitness accounts of his life, one of the things they all show about Jesus is that he invited questions and he welcomed them. And oftentimes when people would come and ask him questions, he loved it, but he would often ask questions in return because he valued questions that much. So if you've ever felt that frustration of, why is it that I can't ask these questions, or why is it when I did, I didn't get good answers? I don't think that would have been your experience or my experience with Jesus, because he understood, and this is important to understand. The reason he invited questions and welcomed questions is he understood people who give weak answers to these type of real, genuine, intellectual, spiritual, faith-based questions. People who give weak answers to that end up creating people who have a weak faith. If you only get the faith answer, you just need to believe, you just need to have more faith, those types of answers eventually lead to a fragile faith, don't they? We've all experienced this. A faith where I was told as a kid, or I was told by this person, you just believe this, and that was it. Couldn't ask any questions, couldn't express any doubts. So I held on to that until, we've all had this experience, until life hit. And my experiences in life did not seem to align with what I'd been told to believe. And for many people, and this may be your story, this is where you eventually get to the point of going, I can't ignore this gap, this conflict anymore. I can't be intellectually dishonest and just close my eyes and accept this, even though nothing in life seems to be lining up with this truth. And this is where so many people walk away from church, they walk away from faith, or in some cases, and maybe this is you because you're here, you keep coming to church on Sunday because the family, it's a thing to do or whatever, but you just don't embrace it. You don't engage with it. You don't try to take it too seriously, because to you it just feels like there aren't any good answers to those questions. And if that's you, and if you've ever felt that way, listen, Jesus would totally understand that, which is why he invited questions so much. So what we're going to do over the next 3 weeks as we lead up to Easter is we're doing this series called 3 Questions Everybody Has About God. And these are questions I think all of us in some way at some time have probably asked. But I want to give the disclaimer on the front end. These may not be your most pressing questions. These may not be the questions that are causing you to stay up at night or causing you to walk away, or every time, you run into a Christian or it's a church deal. These may not be the questions that cause you to dismiss all of that. You may have your own questions, and that's fine. I think it's awesome. What I hope this series does, more than just answer the 3 questions we're going to talk about, is I hope this series gives you the permission and the freedom and the courage to ask your questions. Because I'm telling you, I do not want to follow a God who can't handle questions. I do not want to embrace a faith that cannot stand up under the scrutiny or the rigor of questions. And I don't think you want that either. So it's okay to ask your questions. And if I can take 60 seconds and do a quick plug here, there is something we do around here for all of us who have questions. We've thought the best thing to do is to create an environment where people who have questions can come, and you can ask your questions, you can express your doubts, you can explore faith, and there is no judgment whatsoever. We have found when we put people in a room together to do that together, that's really, really powerful. So if you've been carrying around a bunch of questions, you're trying to figure it out, I just want you to know about something coming up. We call it Starting Point, and you may have seen the room on your right, as you walk in the front doors over here, has Starting Point on it. Well, that room, that space, is where these types of conversations are going to happen. We gather people like you in a room together, and our job, the way we look at it, our job is not to tell you what to believe. We don't do that. Our job is to be a guide. And so we put people together who have doubts, who have questions, who are trying to figure things out. Maybe you've been in church a long time, but often what it is people who are new to faith, and some of you are new to faith, or you're exploring faith, you're trying to figure it out, or, and this is a lot of you as well, you're just coming back to church. You're coming back after a long, long time, and maybe you walked away because of this very reason. You couldn't get good answers to your questions. Well, we take all of us who have questions and put us in a room. And our job is just to guide you. It's to point you to some evidence, to point you to some information that will help you process your questions. And you can figure out for yourself where you land or where you fall. So, if that sounds like you and you would be interested in that, I just want to let you know the Sunday after Easter, which is April 24th, during the 9 a.m. service, we're just doing an informational orientation type meeting right there in that Starting Point room at 9 a.m. So if that's something you'd be interested in, I would invite you to go check it out. I would encourage you to go check it out. We're not asking for a big commitment. We just want you to show up that day. We'll tell you all what it's about and how it works, and then you can decide if you're comfortable doing it or not. But no commitment otherwise. It's on you to decide if you want to do this. But what we do, Jared Martin, some of you know Jared oversees our student ministry. Jared is going to be there helping to lead these discussions over the following weeks after the orientation. And we put some people in there to help guide you who have actually done Starting Point. So they're just like you. They had questions. They went through it. So they get exactly where you're coming from. So you'll get a chance to meet those people and decide if you want to explore some of your questions with them in a smaller group setting over the next few weeks after that. So I just want to make you aware of that. You can just walk into the orientation if you want. But if you'll let us know you're coming, stop by the suite and tell us. Go to journeycalway.com/register and let us know. We'll send you an email reminder and all the information because all of us have busy lives, don't we? So it's easy to forget. Now, today, I want us to tackle the first of the 3 questions we're going to talk about during this series. And the question is simply this: Am I good enough? Am I good enough for God? The reason I think this is a question that we all wonder at times is because you've had moments just like I have where you looked in the mirror and you felt like you weren't even good enough for you. Isn't that true? Haven't we all had moments in life where we thought, oh my gosh, I'm not even happy with me. I didn't even meet my own standard. I'm not good enough for the kind of person I think I ought to be. And so naturally, we just assume if there are moments when we're not good enough for ourselves, well, there are probably moments when we're not good enough for God either. That's a normal question. What you may have never thought about, though, is underneath this question is an assumption. Underneath this question is an idea that you believe is true, an idea that I believe is true, that is worth examining a little bit. Behind this question, am I good enough for God, is the assumption that good people are good with God. Good people are good with God, which just makes sense because that seems to be the way the world works, right? So we just assume, well, good people who are good, God must be good with them. People who are good, they're going to spend an eternity with God. People who are good, I don't know how this works, but one day God's going to gather up all the good people from all the earth, and they're going to spend eternity with God in a good heaven, whatever good heaven looks like. All of us have this assumption that underlies this. Otherwise, we wouldn't wonder if we're good enough for God. That makes sense, doesn't it? And this assumption is normal. But what I want to do today is give you some things to process, because there is a flaw in this basic assumption that may turn this entire question for you upside down. The flaw in the assumption is simply this: that there is no clear scale of good and bad by which we can measure ourselves. Now, let me unpack this for just a second, okay? If you believe, and I think all of us, even followers of Jesus, we all have a tendency to think, well, I should live a good life. I should do good things. And if I'm good enough, then God's happy with me. If I'm not being good enough, God's not happy with me. That's the basics of this. The problem with that approach is that there is no clear scale of good and bad by which we can measure where we stand. I mean, think about it. For starters, if this is the way it works with God, if this is what determines where we stand with God, then God should have given us a very clear definition of what good is. But none of us actually have that. And I'll make that point really simply. If I do something with the wrong motives, but I do it because I know I should do it, and I do it because I know it's a good thing and it's going to help me, well, does that count as being good enough? Or do I have to have the right motive in order for something to really be good? Because we've all done things we didn't want to do, but we did them just because we knew it was the right thing to do, right? Well, which one counts? Do they both count? Do only one of them count? We don't know. Another issue with this, another flaw in this is none of us actually have an idea of how good we have to be good with God. In other words, where is the line? Have you ever thought about this? Where's the line? Do you only have to be, 51% good? You can be 49% bad, but if you're 51% good, then you're good enough for God and everything's good? Or does it have to be 70%? Do you have to make an A on that test? It's got to be a 90, a 93. When I was I feel like the old man now with my kids, because when I was in school, you had to make a 95 to have an A, and they come in with like a 93, and I'm like, back in my day, anyway. So they're sick of hearing it. But it's 2 points. It shouldn't matter. But anyway, none of us understand this, right? You can't. I don't know if you've ever thought about this. You actually don't have clarity, neither do I, around if it works this way, how good is good enough for God. And if this is the way it works, then God owes it to us to tell us where the line is, doesn't he? And if this is the way it works, I really, really want to know where the line is. And I'm just being honest, and maybe you're a better person than me, but I would love to know where the line is, because if it's 51% good, I do not want to be 52% good. I just don't, because I'm losing a percent of fun. Am I not? You are too, right? So it's like, no. You show me where the line is, and I'm going to do the bare minimum to pass. For some of you, this got you all through school, didn't it? You understand this concept. I want to do the bare minimum to pass, and after that, I'm good. That's what all of us would do, most of us at least, if this is how it worked. It's not the way it works, though. The other thing that none of us know about this, it makes this a little difficult, the reason there's no clear standard is we also don't know when our good deeds start counting for us and when our bad deeds start counting against us. For example, if this really worked, wouldn't you hope that your high school years do not count? And college, and your 20s. Let's just start in the 30s, guys. It's like we'd be negotiating when it started, right? Because otherwise, some of us would be like, I can't dig my way out of this hole. I'm already done. I don't have enough time in life left to dig my way out of the hole I'm in. They're actually, and it's just normal. It's natural to assume, well, if I'm good enough, then I'm good with God. But there are actually a lot of flaws in this thinking. If this is the way it worked, if we really believed it worked this way, then none of us have absolute certainty or confidence that we are good with God. We can't. It'd be impossible to have confidence. But this is not the way it works. The way it works is actually, in some ways, it sounds worse, but it turns out to be better in the long run. Now, what happens for a lot of us, at least in America, and I don't know about other countries, but in America, we all have a tendency to want to create our own scale, don't we? You're this way, I'm this way. When you talk to people, everybody's this way. Because when you start talking about this, people are like, well, I think I'm good and everything's good because, and then we basically define our own scale. Because I try to be good to people, I try not to hurt anybody, I try to help, my neighbor and whatever. And then older Americans, now you younger generations do not do this as much, but older Americans will go a step further and you'll say, well, I try to live by the good book too, and the Bible says love God and love your neighbor, and that's what I try to do, and you try to bring the Bible into it because it makes you feel better. And I would just tell those of you who do that, you should stop that, because the last thing you want to do is bring the Bible into this conversation. The Bible has what sounds like some very, very, very bad news for all of us when it comes to this. Paul, you may have heard of Paul. Paul was one of the most religious people in the nation of Israel in the first century. He was a part of a group called the Pharisees who actually had Jesus crucified. Now, Paul was younger at the time, so he wasn't part of that actual group. But as Paul got older, he joined this Pharisee group. And his entire job in life, if you don't know much about the Pharisees, their whole job was to be good. That's what they did. What do you do for a living? I'm good. That's all they did. We're to set an example and a model for everybody. We follow all the rules. We're good, we're good, we're good. That's what Pharisees did, and they were convinced they were better than everybody else. Then Paul becomes a follower of Jesus with all the background that he's got, and Paul's writing a letter to Christians in the city of Rome about this very issue. About this standard, where's the scale? What's the standard that you have to meet to be good with God? And here was Paul's advice to them. Here was Paul's perspective on this, which sounds really, really dreadful. Paul wrote to them and he said, all, including himself, all have sinned and all fall short of the glory or the standard of God. This was Paul's way of saying everybody tried, nobody made it. Everybody shot, nobody hit it. And this is coming from one of the quote-unquote best guys in all the land. He's going, none of us have actually been good enough. And if that doesn't convince you, he goes on the same section and he reiterates it. He says, there's no one righteous, not even one. There's no one who does good, not even one. Now, obviously, Paul's not saying people don't do good things. All of us do good things. Here was Paul's point. Paul's point is there are none of us who can do enough good things to be good with God. We've all missed it. There are none of us who can do enough good things to be good with God. Well, Paul, why would you say that? Because you're pretty good, and I'm trying to be pretty good, and I think it's got to be good enough for God. Well, here's why Paul said that. Because Paul understood there actually is a standard, and the standard is unattainable for all of us. The standard is perfection, to which we go, well, Paul, where did you get that? And he'd go, well, I had a conversation with Peter and Andrew and James and John and Matthew and Thomas and all those guys who were with Jesus for all 3 years when he taught. And they told me what Jesus taught. You know what Jesus said about this? He said, here's your standard. Be perfect just like your Father in heaven is perfect. To which we all go, well, that's impossible. Paul says, yes. And it sounds like terrible news, but it's actually extraordinary news. Because when you set a standard so high that's impossible to meet, then all of us are on a level playing field. When you set a standard so high of perfection that none of us can hit it, well, it's good news in the sense of we can stop trying to hit it because it's impossible to hit. Instead, what Paul taught and what Jesus taught, and the reason I think Jesus gave us this standard is he wanted us to see there is a better way, a much better way to have a relationship with God where everything's good between you and God than trying to be good enough to earn his approval. And I thought about how to illustrate this to you, and I think the best way to do it is through a story that some of you are going to be familiar with, probably a lot of you. It's what happened at the crucifixion. So you may remember that Jesus was crucified, and there were 2 guys that were crucified along with him, one on his right, one on his left. And both of these guys were criminals. Jesus was crucified because he ticked off the Jewish religious leaders, and they talked Pilate into crucifying him, but that was not normal. Normally, people who were crucified were people who were considered to be a severe threat to the Roman Empire. These were not everyday average criminals. These people were considered so bad, these 2 guys, that the Romans didn't even think it was worth putting them on a Roman ship down in the galley, rowing the ship. They didn't think it was worth making them slaves. That's what they did with most criminals. No, these guys, we don't know what they had done, but it had been so bad that the Romans decided the only thing to do with these guys is to kill them in such a way that is a public spectacle, and it will discourage anybody in this empire from ever doing what those guys did. So if you remember the story, as they're all hanging on a cross, the guy on one side of Jesus is doing exactly what you would expect him to do. He is defiant. He's angry. He's spewing insults, not just at everybody down in the crowd and the Roman soldiers. He's spewing insults at Jesus. I mean, he's furious. He is going out the way he came in. But what's interesting is the other guy, the guy to Jesus' right, that guy, something happens that softens him up. And he's not responding the same way. And I'm reading between the lines here a little bit, but all I can assume is that he is watching Jesus, and these guys know Jesus doesn't deserve to be on the cross. They did things that deserve it, but not him. But he's watching Jesus in the middle of this injustice demonstrate such extraordinary kindness and compassion. I mean, he's hanging there listening to Jesus on the cross, look down and say, hey, John, I want you to take care of my mom and make sure all that's good. And he watches as Jesus out loud looks at the very people in the crowd who had him crucified, and he prays, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. It's almost like this kindness, this compassion, this forgiveness that he sees just completely softens his heart to the point that he turns to his left and he asks Jesus a question. And as he's asking Jesus this question, I think everybody in the crowd just started snickering and sneering and probably casting more insults at him. It is a shocking request. You may remember this. He looks at Jesus and he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Now, here's why this gets me. Something happened while they were hanging on a cross that convinced this criminal that the man hanging to his left was actually who he claimed to be. Something happened that convinced this criminal, the man to his left, was God in human flesh. You don't ask somebody to remember you when you die and to bring you into your kingdom if you don't believe they're God and they have the power to do that. Now, this is extraordinary. This is extraordinary. To me, this is maybe the greatest display of trust and faith that we see in all the New Testament documents. Because a criminal hanging on a cross decides that the guy hanging on a cross next to him is God. Do you realize how unbelievable that is? I tried to think of an example, and I don't even think this is a good example, but this is the best I can come up with. This is kind of like if you were on death row and you were waiting for the electric chair, and you somehow came to the conclusion that the cellmate in the cell next to you was God. You're like, how could God be waiting on an electric chair? What's God doing sitting in a prison? Well, of course, if he was God, he wouldn't be here. If he's God, he's not going to an electric chair. It can't be God. God wouldn't end up here. God certainly wouldn't stay here. I mean, it would just be ridiculous to us, wouldn't it? But this is the equivalent of what this criminal on the cross figured out. He came to the conclusion that the guy who was in the exact same shape he was in, the guy who was nailed to a cross, was actually God. And he could come down, but he had decided not to. That is an extraordinary level of trust. And so he looks at him. Now think about this. He looks at him, knowing he's done very little good in his life. He looks at him knowing that, his history and his background, he ought to be right there on that cross. And he looks at Jesus and says, hey, in spite of all of that, would you remember me when you come into your kingdom? And Jesus' reply, I think, stuns everyone. Because he looked back and he said, yeah, I'll tell you the truth, today, you will be with me in paradise. And the criminal believes the guy hanging on a cross to his left. He believes that Jesus has the ability to actually impact what happens to him in eternity. And then they both died. They both died. To me, that's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable, the kind of trust that this criminal would have, but it's also unbelievable to me that Jesus would look back at this guy and say, sure. Because it's not like you can rededicate your life once you're on a Roman cross. It's kind of past that point, don't you think? It's not like you can do enough good to make up for all the bad you've done. This guy's time was over. He had nothing to offer. Nothing to offer to God to prove that he was a changed man, except his expressed trust in Jesus. That was it. And Jesus looked back at him and said, you don't have to do enough good to make up for the bad you've done. You're not going to be able to do any good from here. But I see your trust, and I've got you. I see your trust, and you're accepted. I see your trust. And today you will be with me in eternity. Now, why would Jesus do that? Because Jesus viewed what puts us into a right standing with God very different than how most of us view it. He views it very different. Jesus never taught that good people are good with God. Jesus taught that forgiven people are good with God. From Jesus' point of view, the reason he said, hey, here's the standard, you got to be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect. Oh, none of you can do that? Okay. The reason Jesus found that to be a positive is because Jesus had shown up to be good enough for all of us who couldn't be good enough. And then he died for us so that he could offer us forgiveness, so that he could, in essence, make a trade. I'll take all your mess, all your sin. I'll give you my goodness. I'm going to deal with all the stuff you've created, with all the issues. I'm going to give you my goodness. I'm going to give you my perfection. You can be good with God, not because of how good you are, not because you got to 51% or 70%. Oh, man, you were really good. You were 95% good. No. But because you just choose to trust that Jesus did everything for you that needs to be done. This was his point. Now, for some of you, I get this, I understand this. For some of you, the whole idea of what Jesus taught, because he claimed he was the only way to be good with God. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I am the only way. For some of you, that seems extremely unfair, and I understand that. It seems extremely unfair because you think, well, yeah, but there are good people all over the world. There are good people who believe different things. There are good people who, some of them don't believe in Jesus, but surely a good God's going to let good people and everything's going to be good, right? And you're right if you have some standard that you have to meet to be good enough to be good with God, then absolutely that would work. But I'll tell you what, I would argue that Jesus' approach is way fairer than the be good enough approach. See, with Jesus' approach, he says, guess what? Here's a standard perfection. Nobody on the planet can reach it. Congratulations, you all missed it. You all failed. Now, you're all in the same boat. And those of you who grew up in good families and you were taught how to behave and how to be good and how to treat people, you don't have an advantage anymore over the people who grew up in rough families. And those of you who were born into countries that had good values and practiced good values, you don't have an advantage anymore over people who were born into countries that didn't have good values and treated people rudely or cruelly. There's no advantage anymore. All of us on a level playing field. And Jesus said, now that you all realize none of you are good enough, you're all in the same boat. Now, everybody's invited. Everybody's welcome. Everybody can be good with God the same way. Not by your actions, not by your behaviors, not by your goodness. Just accept my forgiveness. And you're good with God. I don't think you can find a fair, more honest offer anywhere. If you want to believe that you can be good enough to be good with God and that should be okay with God, I would argue that is very unfair. And here's why. Because God didn't give us all the information we needed, if that's the way it works. It'd be kind of like, you remember in college, some of you are in college now. Imagine that you went to the final class of your senior year and you had to pass it in order to graduate. And you walk in the first day and you know how the professor does, they go over everything for the class. Imagine your professor walked in and said, hey, I just want you to know this class is pass-fail. It'll determine whether you graduate. You're going to have a test on the last day of the semester. That's the only test for the entire semester. It's going to determine everything. Class dismissed. To which somebody's going to raise their hand. Maybe you're going to raise your hand and say, whoa. You mean we're not meeting the rest of the semester? No, you got the rest of the semester off. Congratulations. Just show up on this day and take the test. Yeah, but what do we need to study? Oh, I'm not going to tell you what to study. Well, are there some books? There's got to be something we read that's going to help us. No, there's nothing you need to read. You're just going to have to guess what's on the test to pass it. Good luck. See you on the last day. You would scream about how unfair that is, wouldn't you? You didn't know who the dean was. You didn't even know there was a dean, but you'd find the dean somehow and be banging on the door, wouldn't you? It's be like, no, I'm not putting my diploma on something like that. That's so not fair. Well, if you believe that all you have to do is be good enough and everything's good between you and God, that is the dilemma you're in. Because God didn't tell you how he defines good or when he starts counting good or how good is good enough. He didn't show you where the line was. He didn't give you any of the information you would need. You're guessing on all of it. The reason he didn't give you the information is because that's not how it works. Jesus showed up to be good enough for you, so you didn't have to worry about it. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this question, for some of you, you're trying to figure out faith, and part of your challenge is, yeah, but I don't know if I'm good enough, or, I think as long as, maybe I need to believe in Jesus, but I need to be good, and you got all those questions, and I hope this clarifies some of that. But even those of us who follow Jesus, isn't there something in us that tends to question, I don't know, am I living well enough? Am I doing enough good things that God's happy with me now? Listen, anytime you find yourself wondering that, you have lost sight of what your Heavenly Father has already done for you. You don't have to be good enough for God to be happy with you. Once you receive his forgiveness, everything is good between the two of you. You can't be good enough to make God happy. But when you accept his forgiveness, you experience his unconditional acceptance. And unconditional acceptance means you're good no matter what. And I know you're thinking, but yeah, shouldn't we be good people? Yeah. You should do good things. You could serve others and be generous and be loving and kind and patient and all those things. But you shouldn't do them to try to earn God's approval. You ought to do them because that's what you have received from God when you didn't deserve it. And so it's not that far of a stretch for us to show that to people when they don't deserve it. We're just giving to other people what we've experienced ourselves. You do it as a byproduct of the unconditional love and forgiveness your Heavenly Father has shown you, not to earn it. So if you're struggling with that, you can lay down that weight. You don't have to carry that sense of, I don't know where I stand, I'm so uncertain. You don't have to carry that around. When you accept the forgiveness Jesus offers, it's all done. It's taken care of. And if you are somebody who's still trying to earn your way, who's still trying to be good enough, who's still trying to prove that you deserve for God to love you, you can stop trying and you can just start trusting. You can quit trying to earn it and you can reach out and accept the forgiveness that your Heavenly Father offers you. And you can live with the confidence that you're good with God, not because you're good enough. No, you're good with God because He has chosen to love you and forgive you. It is a gift. And you know what gifts are like. All you have to do when somebody offers a gift is accept it. That's it. That's it. That's how easy our Heavenly Father made it. And when it dawns on us that's the way it works, it will change the nature of your relationship with God, because you will always have some distance between you and someone who you feel like you have to earn their approval. You never have distance between you and someone that you know loves and trusts you unconditionally. Your Heavenly Father, He loves and He accepts you unconditionally. You can trust Him. You can follow Him. And yeah, you'll live different and you'll live better and you'll be gooder. That's really bad English, but you'll be gooder. But you will not be gooder because you're trying to earn God's approval. You'll be gooder because of how good God's already been to you. Let me pray for us. For some of us, Father, this is really hard because we just feel like we got to earn everything. And maybe that's the way all of our other relationships have worked. Maybe that's the way our relationship with our earthly, our physical dad works. And so it's just hard for us to believe that you would accept us the way you do. But in this moment, maybe for some of us for the very first time, would you help us to do what that criminal to the right of Jesus did? Just to believe, to trust, and to humble ourselves enough to accept the forgiveness that you offer us. Thank you for your unconditional love. And thank you for not setting it up where we had to be good enough, because, man, all of us would blow that in the end. Thanks for offering forgiveness to make us right with you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.